A lot of longtime Sopranos fans were waiting for this movie, and considering this aired 14 years after the show ended, you can say they had the patience of saints. What's going on, everyone? Welcome back to my channel. Today we're talking about a release from a few months ago, The Many Saints of Newark. Before we begin, let me know in the comments what your thoughts on this movie were, if you already saw it, or if you were planning on seeing it, and make sure to hit that thumbs up button if you like these reviews, as it helps me out immensely by getting my content out there. And if you're new here, I hope you consider hitting that subscribe button so you can stay up to date with reviews of new releases, older films, hidden gems, and so much more on a near daily basis. But let's jump right into it, and let's talk about The Many Saints of Newark. This reveals the humanity behind Tony Soprano's struggles and the influence of his family, especially his uncle Dickie Moltisanti, had over him, becoming the most iconic mob boss of all time. This is directed by Alan Taylor, and it's the prequel to the TV series The Sopranos, and this has series creator David Chase return as a co-writer, as this was a project he's had in the works from pretty much right when the show ended. And while it features a number of the main characters from The Sopranos, most notably Kari Stahl as Uncle Junior, Vera Farmiga as Livia, and the late James Gandolfini's son Michael as a young version of Tony, the focus is primarily on events that supposedly helped shape where these characters were by the beginning of the series, with the main focus being Alessandro Nivola as Tony's Uncle Dickie, Leslie Odom Jr. as one of Dickie's associates named Harold, and John Bernthal as Tony's father, Johnny. And I will say that this film wound up being not really worth the wait, though it's one that I don't think was bad overall. Now, when it comes to film or TV projects that get released a decade or more after the original property, it's rare that they come even close to matching the greatness of the original. Usually what winds up happening is, whatever the project is, it tries to focus on the most heightened aspects of the show or movie and lean into them a little more for the revival project without capturing the subtler moments of their respective predecessors. And this film is another in a long line of revival projects that falls into that category. For one thing, as a Sopranos prequel, I found this to offer not all that much to the Sopranos lore. Despite the plot synopsis indicating this is going to show how the Sopranos characters came to be who they are, I really thought this did a poor job of showing that. Regarding all the returning characters, it was cool to see them, don't get me wrong, but I felt the exact same way towards all of them after seeing this as I did before seeing this. It's a story that feels way too inconsequential, and I say that both in relation to the Sopranos and on its own. For what's supposed to be something akin to an epic as it takes place over the course of 5 years or so, it's a film where a lot happens, yet nothing happens at the same time. Besides brief moments in the first and last acts, the majority of it feels very day in the life for these characters. It's an ensemble piece, and I get with ensemble pieces you have to find a balance of dividing time up evenly among all these characters and still give us compelling material, but it felt like there wasn't much of an emotional arc there for most of these characters. Even though Dickie is the main focus and Alessandro Nivola does a great job, I'd say that it didn't feel like we were truly building towards anything with this character. Now, he does have some solid emotional beats and some sequences involving his father, played by Ray Liotta, and his new wife, played by Michela De Rossi, but again, it never felt like it was leading towards something specific. It's just a look at how all these characters interact with one another. Now, don't get me wrong, because of the great performances by most of the cast, I enjoyed all these character interactions, and that was a big reason why I didn't dislike the movie, and there have been some pretty solid ensemble pieces chronicling little moments in characters' lives that work really well. Like, if you want any good examples and you're into older films, just check out anything by Robert Altman, who was great at that sort of stuff. But even with those sort of films, even if they're focused on smaller moments, they still feel like they build towards something, some emotional arc or some journey. This didn't feel like a journey. At times, there didn't feel like there was much of a point at all. There was especially a great opportunity to incorporate something meaningful, considering the first part of the film took place against the backdrop of the 1967 Newark riots, and Harold does take part in those riots, and it does play into his own arc, but the film does absolutely nothing with this, other than to incorporate a historical event for the sake of it. I felt it could have been used to highlight some of the social tensions at the time, and give us more of an insight into how some of these characters we follow later in The Sopranos tick more, but the film chose to make this feel like a passing moment, and I found it to be a wasted opportunity. Now, on that note, I will say that of all the character arcs we got here, Harold's was probably the most meaningful, and the one I found myself most engaged in. For one thing, Leslie Odom Jr. is just a phenomenal actor, and I'm glad to see he's been getting some really nice prominent roles as of late. And two, he's the only one of all these characters who had any sort of real set goals, as he's trying to start his own operation, and he wants to break away from Dickie, and that made for some strong enough material. But it's not the sole focus of the entire movie. It's a decent portion of the movie, but we're cutting back and forth between that and a number of other storylines and they were all ones that didn't go much of anywhere. And while I liked Harold Ark, I did find it somewhat odd that the best storyline in a movie marketed as a Sopranos prequel was someone who had little to no consequence on the Sopranos characters in the end. Without spoiling anything, where Harold's storyline winds up going, it doesn't have much of an effect on anything related to these other characters. Like I said, it was told well, it just again plays into that overall feel of this movie feeling inconsequential in a way. I felt like this needed to be a miniseries instead, and I know they're now talking about returning to this with some of the same cast to do a miniseries, but that's what this should have been right from the start. I mean, it is difficult to make great movie adaptations of TV series in general, not that it hasn't been done before, but because what makes these TV characters beloved is that we're with them for what adds up to hours of time over years, and there are so many emotional ups and downs we go with them along the way. And that's something that's nearly impossible to recreate for film. I mean, obviously not that there aren't emotional ups and downs in movies, but you're only able to get in so much compared to a TV series. Now again, I will say it was cool to revisit a lot of these older characters, even if most of them played smaller parts, and I thought the performances by most of the cast, whether they were playing older or newer characters, was solid for the most part. And it was a big reason why I was at least fine with the movie. Alessandro Nivola was great, Leslie Odom Jr. was excellent, John Bernthal was really solid, Ray Liotta was good, and with the exception of Michael Gandolfini, who I thought was only okay in one of his first major roles, I thought the casting of everyone as the returning characters was spot on, as they all captured the mannerisms of each character they played perfectly. Corey Stoll as Junior was probably the best casting choice, as he gets some of the characters' abrasive mannerisms down so well that it felt like we were truly watching a young Dominic Chinese, and Vera Farmiga was top-notch as Livia, as were Billy Magnuson and John Magaro as younger versions of Paulie and Silvio. And Michael Imperioli also returns as Christopher in a voiceover-only role, narrating the film, and I was mixed on this. Not that I have anything against the character, but it felt very shoehorned in. You hear him once or twice at the beginning, once in the middle to explain the time jump, and then in the end to just give us the final line of the film. It felt a bit distracting, as it didn't add much to the story. I mean, I'm honestly not always the biggest fan of narration in films in general, as I do feel like it's a way of cutting corners and having everything explained to us, rather than allowing for audiences to visually connect with certain emotional beats. But while too much narration can often be distracting, too little narration can be distracting as well, as it's not there consistently enough to feel like an integral part of the film, and it can take you out of the moment. And that's honestly how I felt when we go for 45 minutes or so, then suddenly hear Michael Imperioli just give us 2 or 3 throwaway sentences after not hearing him for so long. It's a little jarring, and it also just adds to the overall feeling I got that this film felt pretty inconsequential. The Many Saints of Newark is fine for what it is, though I wouldn't call it anything truly worth waiting for the Sopranos fans. It lacks a lot of the nuances that went into the Sopranos, and honestly, it feels like a generic day-in-the-life mob movie, with some appearances by beloved Sopranos characters. With the exception of Leslie Odom Jr.'s Harold, there just weren't any major arcs or too many concrete emotional moments to truly hook you in. That being said, the casting was solid all around, and everyone gave committed performances. And because of just how well they all did, it was enough to keep me fairly interested, even if not to the entrancing levels that The Sopranos did. It's nothing masterful, but it's overall a decent watch. The Many Saints of Newark gets a 6.5 out of 10. So let me know, did you see The Many Saints of Newark, or are you planning to see it, and what were your thoughts? Did this live up to your expectations? How did it compare to The Sopranos for you? Let me know in the comments below so we can discuss. Also, if you enjoyed this video, please like it and share it, and for more movie reviews and film discussion, please make sure to hit that subscribe button to stay updated. Thanks for watching everyone, and keep having fun with film.